Ma'am, if you don't have the insurance card, we need a payment up front. My son was wheezing so hard his little chest looked like it might crack open. Oliver clung to my neck with one burning hand while the other gripped the collar of my sweater. Ethan was at the ER doors shouting for a nurse, and I was digging into his truck left compartment with shaking fingers, looking for anything with our policy number on it. Instead, I found a bank envelope. I only looked because our whole life had become a search for money. I wear 'em off. The rent. Oliver's inhaler. The gas bill. My part-time paycheck stretching like cheap fabric. Ethan had told me 3 days earlier we had $92 left until Friday. I remember that number because I cried over it in the grocery store and put back a box of cereal Oliver liked. So when I pulled out a statement showing a balance of $412,000, I forgot how to breathe. And the name on the account wasn't Ethan Cole. It was Evelyn Hartwell, my mother's name. My mother had been dead for 17 years. I stood there in the parking lot lights, Oliver coughing behind the glass doors, and felt the world tilt under me. Before I could read another line, Ethan came running, saw the envelope in my hand, and went white. Not surprised, not confused, guilty. He snatched it so fast the paper cut my thumb. "What is that?" I whispered. He looked straight at me and said, "This is not the time." But that wasn't the worst part. He shoved the envelope into his jacket like I hadn't just seen the number, like I hadn't just seen my dead mother's name, sitting over a pile of money while my son fought for air and the hospital asked me for a card we supposedly couldn't afford. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab his face and force the truth out of him right there between the vending machines and the automatic doors. But Oliver was crying and a nurse came rushing toward us with a breathing mask. And in that moment, I had to choose between the mystery that had just cracked open my marriage and the little boy who still called for me in his sleep. So I chose my son. I ran inside, held Oliver while they gave him oxygen, and told myself I would deal with Ethan later. But when I looked up from my child's frightened eyes, Ethan was across the room, pacing with one hand over his mouth, not like a worried father, like a man whose secret had finally found him. That was the moment everything in my life split into before and after. Before the envelope, Ethan was the husband I kept making excuses for. The man who said money was tight, work was unstable, and I just had to trust him a little longer. After the envelope, every unpaid bill, every late night phone call, every time he turned his screen away from me, every time he told me I was too emotional to deal with finances, every single one of those moments came back with teeth. I wasn't a suspicious wife before that night. Tired, yes. Lonely, absolutely. But suspicious? No. I had spent 10 years trying to be the kind of woman who made a marriage work even when it hurt. I took extra shifts at the florist. I sold my grandmother's bracelet when Ethan said the truck needed repairs. I stopped asking questions when he sighed like I was one more burden on top of all the others. Because that's what love looks like when you've been trained to shrink inside it. You call sacrifice loyalty, you call silence peace. You call your own instincts drama, and I had practiced ignoring pain. My mother died when I was 16. My Aunt Linda took me in, kept a roof over my head, and reminded me every other day what it cost her. I learned early not to ask for too much, not to make trouble, not to expect rescue. When Ethan came into my life at 24 with his warm voice, easy smile, and those patient hands that seemed to know how to hold all the broken pieces of me, I thought I was one of the lucky women. I didn't know I was being studied. I didn't know what was coming next. Oliver was kept overnight for observation. By 2 a.m, his breathing had settled and he was finally asleep, curled under a stiff hospital blanket with one fist tucked under his chin. Ethan sat by the window staring out at the parking lot. I stood at the foot of the bed and watched him the way you watch a stranger you're suddenly afraid to turn your back on. "Who is Evelyn Hartwell?" I asked softly. He didn't look at me. "Nora, please. That's my mother's name." "I know. Then why is she on a bank account with $400,000 in it?" His jaw tightened. "It's not what it looks like." "Then tell me what it is." He rubbed his face. "It's old probate stuff. Your aunt knows about it." That answer hit me almost as hard as the statement itself. My Aunt Linda knew about money with my mother's name on it, money I had never heard about in my life. "What probate stuff?" I asked. "It's complicated." "No." I stepped closer. "Complicated is taxes. Complicated is financing. This is my dead mother's name on a secret account in your truck while we're being asked for money in the ER. So don't tell me it's complicated. Tell me the truth." You finally looked at me then, and I saw something I had never let myself name before. Not shame, not fear. Control. He lowered his voice. "You need to calm down." This isn't the place. There it was. The sentence that had ended every hard conversation in our marriage. Calm down. Later. Not now. You're overreacting. You don't understand. I had heard those words so often they almost sounded like logic. But standing there beside my sleeping child, I felt something old and buried in me lift its head. If you don't tell me, I said, I will find out myself. For the first time in years, Ethan looked uncertain. The next morning, he acted like the conversation had never happened. He bought Oliver a stuffed dinosaur from the gift shop, joked with the nurse, kissed my forehead, and said he'd take care of the discharge paperwork. If someone had walked in then, they would have seen a tired husband doing his best, not a man who had turned pale at the sight of my mother's name. On the drive home, I watched his hands on the steering wheel. Steady. Normal. Too normal. Oliver was dozing in the back seat, still weak from the attack. I waited until we stopped at a red light. I want to see the statement again. Ethan kept his eyes ahead. I shredded it. My stomach dropped. You what? It didn't matter. It mattered to me. It was old paperwork, Nora. Then why shred it? He exhaled like I was exhausting him. Because I knew you'd obsess over it and blow this into something ugly. Something ugly. As if ugly had started with my questions. As if ugly wasn't the secret fortune hidden behind a dead woman's name. And then everything changed again. When we got home, there was a shut-off notice taped to our front door. Final warning. Electric service would be disconnected within 48 hours. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. I had given Ethan $600 from my last paycheck 3 days earlier for utilities and Oliver's medication refill. $600 I earned wiring funeral flowers while my feet ached and my hands cracked from cold water. I turned slowly toward him. Where did my paycheck go? He snatched the notice down before Oliver could see it. I'll handle it. That's not an answer. He stepped closer, lowering his voice, because our son was just inside the hallway. Can you not do this right now? When exactly am I allowed to do it, Ethan? Because apparently, when our son can't breathe is not the time. When my dead mother's name shows up on a secret account is not the time. Now our lights are about to get shut off, and somehow this still isn't the time. Oliver appeared in the doorway holding his dinosaur. Money? I swallowed the rest. That's how secrets survive in families. Not because no one sees them, because there is always a child in the next room, a bill on the table, a dinner to cook, a reason to wait one more hour. But I was done waiting. That afternoon, while Ethan showered, I took his jacket from the chair and searched every pocket. No statement, no bank envelope. But tucked into the inside lining was a small receipt from a branch across town. Just a deposit slip stub with the last 4 digits of an account number and a date from 2 weeks earlier. I took a photo of it and slid it back before he came downstairs. Then I called my Aunt Linda. She answered on the second ring with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted to sound kind without ever being warm. Nora, is Oliver okay? Ethan texted me. He's okay, I said. I need to ask you something. Did my mother ever have a bank account you know about? A pause. Too long. What kind of question is that? She asked. The kind with an answer. I handled funeral costs, not bank accounts. Ethan said you knew about some probate issue. Another pause. Then a small laugh. Probate, honey, after all these years? If there had been money, don't you think you'd know? That should have calmed me. Instead, it made my skin prickle, because Linda had always answered quickly when she was telling the truth. It was one of the strange facts he learned about the people who raise you badly. You become fluent in the spaces between their words. What aren't you telling me? I asked. Her tone cooled. What I'm not telling you is that you sound worked up. Maybe you should rest before you start making accusations. Worked up. The same language. The same pressure pressing me back into doubt. By the time I hung up, my hands were trembling. But that wasn't the end of it. That night, Ethan fell asleep on the couch with his phone on his chest. He never did that. He guarded that thing like it contained state secrets. I stood over him for a full minute listening to the house hum in the dark, my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I took the phone. His passcode used to be Oliver's birthday. It wasn't anymore. I tried our anniversary. Wrong. I tried his mother's birthday. Wrong. I was about to put it back when the screen lit with a notification. Transfer complete. Art Hurl E-Estate Holding. The message vanished before I could read more, but I had seen enough. Estate. Holding. Not probate confusion. Not a clerical error. Something active. Something current. I placed the phone back on his chest and lay awake until sunrise, staring at the ceiling and replaying every money conversation from the last 5 years. The time Ethan said we had to stop trying for another baby because fertility treatment was too expensive. The time he told me we couldn't fix the roof yet. The time he asked me to sign a stack of papers after my miscarriage because he said they were for hospital billing and insurance appeals. That memory stopped me cold. I had signed without reading. I was on pain medication. I was bleeding. I could barely sit upright, and Ethan kept saying, "Just here, babe, and here. We have to get this handled." What had I signed? The next morning, I called in sick for the first time in 8 months and drove to the bank branch on the receipt. I told Ethan I was picking up Oliver's prescription. My whole body felt wired, like one wrong word might blow my life apart. At the customer service desk sat a young woman with dark curls and bright red glasses. She smiled automatically, then did a double take. "Nora Bell." It took me a second. "Camila." She laughed in surprise. "High school Camila. Debate team. You used to destroy people without raising your voice." For a second, I almost cried. Not because we had ever been close, but because someone in that room remembered a version of me I had lost. I leaned in. "Camila, I need help." I showed her the photo of the deposit receipt. I didn't tell her everything, just enough. My husband. A hidden account. My mother's name. She grew serious fast. "I can't give you private account information," she said quietly. "You know that. I know. I'm not asking you to break rules. I just need to know what this is." She typed the last 4 digits into her system, then looked up at me in a way that told me she had already seen too much. "I shouldn't even say this," she murmured, "but that isn't a standard personal account. It's managed through trust services." My knees nearly gave out. "A trust?" She nodded once. "If it involves an estate, you may be able to request records as a beneficiary. Probate court would have filings. If your name is connected, start there." "Is Ethan connected to it?" She hesitated. That was answer enough. What I saw next shocked me more than I expected. As I turned to leave, Camila touched my wrist. "Nora, be careful. If someone hid this from you for years, they won't like being exposed." I wish I could say I drove straight to the courthouse and handled everything like the strong woman I eventually became. I didn't. I sat in my car in the bank parking lot and sobbed until my chest hurt. Not pretty crying, not movie crying. The kind that makes you fold over the steering wheel and bite your own hand to stay quiet. Because the truth had started to take shape and it was uglier than cheating. Cheating would have been simpler. Another woman, another bed, another life. This was my mother. This was years. This was theft buried inside grief. I called the only person I knew who understood paperwork and pain, Tasha Reed. We had been best friends in college until marriage, bills, motherhood, and Ethan's constant complaints about how she was too aggressive slowly pulled us apart. She became a legal aid attorney. I became a woman who apologized for missing too many calls. She answered on the first ring. "Nora?" I choked on her name, and that was enough. "Where are you? 10 minutes away." "Send me the address." When Tasha climbed into my car, she didn't ask why I hadn't called in 2 years. She handed me tissues, waited until I could breathe, and said, "Start from the hospital." I told her everything. The statement, my mother's name, the trust department, the transfer notification, the papers after the miscarriage. By the time I finished, her face had gone still in the way lawyers' faces do when they're already building a case. "Nora," she said carefully, "do you remember signing anything giving Ethan power over your finances?" "I don't know. Power of attorney? Trust administration? Temporary guardianship?" I was barely conscious. I thought it was insurance. Tasha closed her eyes for one beat. "Then we start with records. Today." And then everything accelerated. At the probate clerk's office, Tasha did most of the talking while I sat beside her trying not to shake. We requested every filing connected to Evelyn Harwell's estate. The clerk disappeared into the back and returned with a slim folder that should not have been slim if my mother had left nothing. Inside were copies of old documents, court acknowledgments, and one amendment filed 3 years earlier. I saw Ethan's name first, then mine. Then the signature that was supposed to be mine. It looked like my handwriting if you saw it from across a room. Up close, it was wrong. Too careful. Too slow. Like someone had studied me and traced the idea of me instead of my actual hand. I felt cold all over. Tasha took the page from me. "This is not your signature?" "No." The amendment named Ethan Cole as acting co-trustee for Hartwell Estate Holdings due to beneficiary incapacity following medical trauma. I stared at the words until they stopped making sense. Beneficiary incapacity, medical trauma, 3 years earlier, the miscarriage. He had used the worst moment of my life to get legal control over something that belonged to me. But that still wasn't the full horror. The next page listed the beneficiary. Me, Nora Evelyn Bell. The trust had been created by my mother before she died. Not for herself, for me. And I had never been told. I felt something tear open inside me then, not just anger but grief that arrived late and violent. All those years I believed my mother left me nothing but a photo album and a silver hairbrush. All those years I defended Ethan when money was tight, when dreams were postponed, when I buried my own wants because we just couldn't afford it. All while he sat beside a trust with my name attached. Tasha put a hand on my back. Look at me. I couldn't. Nora. I raised my head. This is fraud. The word landed like thunder. Fraud. Not misunderstanding. Not marital trouble. Fraud. She kept going, voice low and steady. If he accessed trust assets without informed consent, forged your signature, or misrepresented your capacity, this can become civil and criminal very fast. We need copies of everything. Now. So we got everything we could. Filing dates. Trustee changes. Mailing address updates. That was another knife 2 years ago. The trust correspondence address had been changed from our house to a post office box across town. The request was signed by Ethan. My husband had rerouted my mother's estate out of my own home. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew one thing with absolute clarity for the first time in years. I was not imagining this. On the drive back, Tasha asked if I had somewhere safe to stay. I almost laughed. Safe from what? She looked at me. Men who steal this much don't usually give it back because you ask nicely. That sentence followed me all the way home. Ethan's truck wasn't there when I pulled in. Oliver was at school. The house felt too quiet. I stood in the kitchen staring at the fruit bowl. The unpaid bills, the crack in the tile by the sink, ordinary things that suddenly looked like props in someone else's lie. Then I heard a soft ping from the family laptop Ethan sometimes used for invoices. He had forgotten to sign out of his email. My hands moved before my conscience caught up. The inbox was mostly word junk and payment reminders. Then I found a folder labeled Archive 2. Buried deep inside it were messages between Ethan and someone named L. Mercer. At first I thought mistress. I opened one. The funds should clear before the condo closing. Don't message this account anymore. Nora is getting suspicious. My vision blurred. There were 10 more. Not romantic. Strategic. Money. Deadlines. A property in another town. A nursery paying quote. Medical reimbursement paperwork. Nursery. Paying quote. Medical reimbursement paperwork. Nursery. I clicked faster, pulse roaring in my ears until I hit an attachment to lease agreement for a small furnished condo. Occupant listed, Lauren Mercer. And beneath that, in a scanned prenatal invoice, I saw the words estimated due date. I sat there so still I could hear the refrigerator motor kick on. He wasn't just stealing from me, he was building a new life with someone else. And he was using my mother's money to pay for it. But that wasn't even the part that broke me most. At the bottom of one email thread, there was a message from Ethan to Lauren. Once the trust issue was fully settled, I'll file. She won't fight me. She never does. I read that line 4 times. She won't fight me. It had reduced my whole soul to compliance. Years of swallowing pain, excusing lies, postponing myself, and he'd mistaken it for weakness that would last forever. That was his first real mistake. I forwarded everything to a new email Tasha told me to create, took photos with my phone, and cleared the browser history. Then I picked Oliver up from school with a smile so fake it hurt my teeth. That evening, Ethan walked in carrying pizza like he was a hero. He kissed Oliver, asked about school, and set a box on the counter. My skin crawled at the sound of his voice. I watched him laugh with our son and understood something terrifying. Men can compartmentalize evil with incredible ease if it protects the version of themselves they want the world to see. After Oliver went to bed, Ethan opened a beer and sat on the couch. I stood in the doorway and asked, "Who is Lauren Mercer?" His hand froze. Just a second. Then he took a sip. "Client. You're paying for her condo with my mother's trust." The color drained from his face. He set the beer down carefully. "You enter my email? That's your concern?" He stood up slowly. "How much do you think you know?" There was no denial, not even a weak attempt. I laughed, but it came out broken. "Enough." He ran a hand to his hair. Lauren is complicated. That baby due in August seems pretty simple. His eyes flashed then. Anger, not remorse. Lower your voice? Why? So Oliver doesn't hear that his father used my dead mother's money to buy another woman a nursery? He stepped toward me. You have no idea what this really is. Then explain it. Instead, he said the cruelest thing he could find. You haven't exactly been easy to live with since the miscarriage. I swear the room went silent. No words for a full second. Just the hum of the lamp and my own heartbeat. He saw I had gone too far, but it was too late. You used that? I whispered. You used that to steal from me, and now you use it to excuse this? He pressed his lips together. I'm saying things got hard. For who? For both of us. I shook my head. No. Hard was losing a baby. Hard was bleeding in the shower while you told me we'd try again someday. Hard was hearing you say we couldn't afford therapy every week. Hard was me thinking we were drowning while you were hiding hundreds of thousands of dollars. He looked away, and then I saw it. The crack beneath the performance. He wasn't sorry. He was cornered. What happened next changed the direction of the whole story. The next morning, Tasha met me at a coffee shop with a printout from a private investigator she'd begged a favor from overnight. Lauren Mercier wasn't just a random affair. She was Ethan's girlfriend of almost 2 years, and she had no criminal record, no shady financial history, no obvious connection to fraud, which meant something strangely important. There was a chance she had no idea where the money came from. But the bigger revelation was in a second file Tasha slid across the table, a chain of old messages between Ethan and my Aunt Linda. The oldest was dated 11 years earlier, 5 months before Ethan and I accidentally met at a charity event Linda begged me to attend. Linda, she still doesn't know about the Hartwell release timeline. Keep her calm. She needs stability around her. Ethan, I can do that. Linda, if you're serious about her, there may be a future for both of you. But don't mention the estate until the right time. I couldn't speak. Tasha watched my face carefully. There's more. There was, message after message, years of them. Not constant, but enough. Linda updating Ethan on deadlines tied to the trust. Ethan asking whether certain distributions would vest automatically. Linda warning him not to let me get influenced by outside people. My aunt had not just known. She had helped place him in my life. I think some part of me left my body then. Not in a dramatic way. In a cold, practical way. Because one betrayal I might have survived with screaming. Two stacked on top of each other like that marriage and family, love and blood felt too large to process as feeling. So my mind turned it into math. 11 years. 11 years of being handled. 11 years of being guided toward the very man who would one day tell another woman I wouldn't fight. I folded over the table and whispered, was any of it real? Tasha reached for my hand. Maybe parts of it were real to you. That matters. But what he did was still calculated. That was the first major twist. My husband hadn't just betrayed me somewhere along the way. He had entered my life already carrying a map. But somehow, it still got worse. When I got home that afternoon, the front door was unlocked. Oliver's backpack was gone. Ethan's closet was half empty. On the kitchen table sat a single sheet of paper. Oliver's with my mother for a few days. You need time to calm down and think before you do something reckless. I can't describe the sound that came out of me when I read that. It was pure animal panic. I called Ethan. No answer. Called again. Voicemail. Called Darlene, his mother. She answered with a sigh. He's with family, she said. The child doesn't need to be around your instability. My instability? You're hysterical, Nora. Ethan told me everything. Digging through his things, screaming, dragging up old tragedies. Put my son on the phone. No. That single word nearly made me black out. I was already grabbing my keys when Tasha called me back. I told her in a rush, and her voice sharpened instantly. Do not go there alone. That's my child. I know. Listen to me. This is exactly what men like him do. They provoke you, then call you unstable when you react. We do this right. Right. I hated that word in that moment. Right felt slow. Right felt polite. Right felt impossible when my son was in another woman's house and my husband had started weaponizing my grief against me. But Tasha was right. Within 2 hours, she had me in an emergency consult with the family attorney she trusted. By evening, we had filed for temporary orders citing financial fraud, wrongful withholding of a minor child, and concerns about retaliatory conduct. I didn't understand half the language, But I understood the look on the attorney's face when she read the forged trust amendment. That man made a mistake, she said, a big one. I didn't know what was coming next. At 9 that night, Ethan finally called. You're being dramatic, he said as soon as I answered. Where is Oliver? Safe. Let me talk to him. He's asleep. I closed my eyes. Bring him home. You need to stop spiraling. I filed paperwork, silence. Then, you what? I know about the trust. I know about Linda. I know about Lauren. I know about the forged signature. So bring my son home, Ethan. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. The softness was gone. Be careful. With what? With the stories you tell. Courts don't like mothers who are unstable. A chill went through me. You forged documents saying I was incapacitated. You signed what you signed. No, I didn't. He laughed quietly, and it was the ugliest sound I had ever heard. Can you prove that? I gripped the phone so hard my hand cramped. Then he said, maybe you should think about how this looks. You've had mental health treatment. You've been emotional for years. You go after me with wild accusations, you might lose more than money. That was when fear became something cleaner. Rage. Because for years I had mistaken his calm for strength. But calm is cheap when the world is built to believe you. What he had always counted on was my shame. My silence around therapy, around miscarriage, around the months I barely slept because grief sat on my chest like concrete. He thought those things made me weak. He was about to learn what survival actually looks like. The next day delivered the second twist, and it hit harder than the affair, harder than the forgery, maybe harder even than Linda's betrayal. Tasha arranged for a forensic review of the trust file through a contact in probate. There was mention of a sealed safe deposit box attached to Hartwell Estate Holdings. Only the primary beneficiary could petition access. Me. No one had told me. We got an emergency order. By late afternoon, I was sitting in a private bank room with the manager, Tasha beside me, my hands ice cold in my lap. The box was smaller than I expected. Inside were 3 things: a pearl ring, a bundle of official documents, and 1 letter in my mother's handwriting. My name was on the envelope. For a second, I couldn't open it. My mother had been gone more than half my life. I had spent years trying to remember the exact sound of her voice, the way she smelled after using hand cream, whether she tucked her hair behind her left ear or right when she was nervous. And now here she was, suddenly close enough to tear me open. Tasha squeezed my hand. I unfolded the letter. My sweet Nora, if you are reading this, it means enough time has passed that the money I'd protected for you is finally in your hands. I pray it was given to you with honesty. I pray no one made you feel small for receiving what was always yours. I stopped breathing. She knew. Somehow, she knew exactly what kind of world might be waiting for me. The letter continued. She wrote about saving quietly after my father died, about a lawsuit settlement from his wrongful death case that she never trusted other relatives with. She wrote that she had asked her sister Linda to oversee logistics only until I was old enough and settled, but never to interfere with the truth, never to hide it from me, never to use it as leverage over my life. Then came the line that broke me in half. Do not marry any person who asks you to doubt your own mind. I covered my mouth and sobbed. All those years, I thought my mother had left me almost nothing. But the real inheritance wasn't just the money. It was the warning, the permission, the sentence I should have had before Ethan ever touched my life. And there was one more page in the file. An accounting summary, distribution history, unauthorized withdrawals, property transfers, legal fees, personal reimbursements. Total assets diverted over 3 years, $387. I stared at the number so long it lost meaning. He hadn't just stolen comfort. He hadn't just stolen future plans. He had stolen time, safety, choices, years of my son's life, years of mine. What I did next surprised even me. I called Lauren Mercer. Tasha had found her number. My hands shook when she answered, but my voice was steady. Lauren, my name is Nora Bell. I'm Ethan's wife. There was silence, then a sharp inhale. I think I said, there are things you need to know. We met that evening in a diner near the highway. Neutral ground, bright lights, nowhere to hide. Lauren came in wearing a beige coat over a round belly and looked younger than I expected. Tired, guarded, scared. She sat across from me like she expected a drink thrown in her face. Instead, I slid the trust documents across the table. At first, she denied everything Ethan had told her, said we were separated, said the condo was from an investor deal, said he told her I was emotionally volatile and that he stayed for the child. With each page, her face changed. The forged signature, the estate records, the emails, the transfer summary. By the time she reached the prenatal invoice he paid from Hartwell Assets, she looked sick. He told me it was his mother's family money, she whispered. It was mine. Tears filled her eyes. I didn't know. I believed her. And then she said something that detonated the last wall Ethan had left standing. He was going to leave next week. I went still. What? Lauren nodded, crying now. He said once one last transfer cleared, he'd tell you the marriage had been over for years. He said you'd be too ashamed to fight because of your mental health history. He said you never wanted conflict. There it was again. The same story he told about me. The same grave he thought I would lie down in. But Lauren had one more thing. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. He made me keep copies of our property conversations because he said his investors were paranoid. I started recording calls. I didn't trust him lately. My pulse jumped. What's on it? He talks. A lot. The next morning, Tasha and the attorney listened to the audio. I sat rigid in a leather chair as Ethan's voice filled the office. On one call, he laughed about unlocking the Hartwell nest after years of patience. On another, he said, Nora signs whatever I put in front of her if she's emotional enough. On a third, he complained that Linda wanted a bigger cut for setting the whole thing up. We had him. Not morally, not emotionally, legally. But that wasn't the end. Ethan still had Oliver. Ethan still thought he could scare me. Ethan still believed the old version of me would show up when pressure hit. He was wrong. The confrontation happened 2 days later at Darlene's house, after our attorney secured an emergency order and a sheriff agreed to accompany us. I remember every detail. The dry wind. The smell of cut grass. The way my hands stopped shaking the second I saw the patrol car in the driveway, because fear finally had somewhere to go. Darlene opened the door and froze when she saw the sheriff. What is this? She demanded. Where is my son? I said. Ethan appeared behind her, anger already rising in his face. You actually did this? Yes. He looked from me to the deputy to Tasha and back again. Maybe for the first time, he understood he wasn't dealing with isolation anymore. I had witnesses now, documents, law, voice. Oliver came running from the living room in his socks. Mommy! I dropped to my knees and caught him so hard he squealed. I buried my face in his hair and felt something inside me settle. Ethan had underestimated the difference between a woman enduring pain and a mother protecting a child. When I stood up, Oliver behind me holding my hand, Ethan sneered. You're making a huge mistake. No, I said. That was marrying you. Darlene started shouting that I was humiliating the family, that Ethan had carried me for years, that grief had made me unstable. I barely heard her. My eyes were on Ethan. You forged trust documents, I said. You stole from my mother's estate. You used my miscarriage to claim I was incapable. You hid money, funded another household, and conspired with Linda to keep me ignorant for 11 years. His face flickered when I said Linda's name. Good. He took a step closer. You can't prove conspiracy. Tasha lifted a folder. You want to try that again? He saw the folder. His eyes narrowed. Then he made the mistake. That ended him. He looked straight at me and said, You were never supposed to find out this early. The deputy's head turned. I felt the silence land around us like a trap closing. What did you say? I asked. He realized it a second too late. I said, No, say it again. His chest rose and fell. His whole body looked suddenly less polished, less composed. Not a mastermind. Just a greedy man standing in daylight. It wouldn't have mattered, he snapped. That money would have been wasted on you anyway, Darlene gasped softly. Even she hadn't expected him to drop the mask that far. I took one step toward him. Wasted on me? You heard me. That money was my father's death settlement. My mother protected it for me, for our family. He laughed bitterly. Our family. You mean the family where I carried every decision because you fell apart every time life got hard? I think he expected me to cry then, to shatter, to become the woman he had been narrating for everyone else. Instead, I said very clearly, you mistook my grief for permission. He went still. The deputy asked him to step back. Ethan ignored him, eyes locked on mine. I waited years, he hissed. Years, Nora. Do you understand that? I built everything. I managed the timeline. I kept you stable. Linda kept you quiet. And for what? For you to blow it up because you found one envelope? There it was. Full confession. Ugly, arrogant, complete. Tasha didn't move. She didn't need to. The recorder in her open tote bag was running. Darlene started crying, not for me, not even for Oliver, but for the collapse of the image she had worshipped in her son. Ethan looked around and seemed to realize all at once that no one in that driveway was going to rescue him anymore. The deputy stepped forward. Mr. Cole, I'm advising you not to say anything further. Ethan laughed once, too loud. Now you want me quiet? Oliver squeezed my hand tighter. I bent and picked him up. Then Ethan said the thing that finally killed whatever tiny soft piece I had left for him. You'd have had nothing without me. I looked at him for a long moment. All the nights I waited up, all the bills, all the lies I defended, all the times I thought surviving beside him was the best I could do. Then I said, no, I had less because of you, and I walked away. The weeks after that were not magically easy. Justice in real life is paperwork, testimony, panic attacks in parking lots, lawyers billing by the hour, and your child asking why daddy doesn't live at home. It is not neat. It is not cinematic. It hurts in ugly places. But it came. Lauren turned over the recordings and financial files. She moved out of the condo and filed her own statement once she learned the down payment came from stolen trust money. Linda, faced with discovery, tried to claim she only deferred sensitive information to protect me. The email trail destroyed her. Darlene stopped calling after the third time her defense of Ethan got colder even to her own ears. The court froze the remaining trust assets. A forensic audit traced property purchases, hidden transfers, and payment chains Ethan thought were too tangled to follow. They weren't. Greed makes people sloppy, especially men who believe the women around them exist to absorb consequences. The house I thought we were losing, it turned out Ethan had been pushing it toward default while quietly routing money elsewhere. Once the financial orders hit, that changed too. Not overnight, but enough. Enough for the lights to stay on. Enough for Oliver's medication to be paid for without me counting coins in a pharmacy line. And Ethan, he lost more than money. Fraud charges were filed. Civil actions followed. His business reputation collapsed the minute people realized investment flexibility had really meant theft from his wife's family trust. Some of his friends vanished fast. Others called me in whispers to say they always thought something about him felt off. I learned to hate that sentence. People always say they knew after it cost you everything. Still, I won't lie to you. The real victory didn't happen in court. It happened quietly in pieces. The first time I sat across from a therapist and told the full truth without minimizing it. The first time I opened a bank statement in my own name and understood every line. The first time Oliver asked if we were poor anymore and I told him we are safe and actually meant it. The first time I walked into my own kitchen and didn't brace for criticism that never came. Tasha stayed. That matters. She helped me rebuild more than a case. She helped me relearn what friendship feels like when it isn't constantly negotiated around a man's comfort. Hamila checked in once with a card that simply said, "You still destroy people without raising your voice." I laughed for the first time in weeks when I read it. Even Lauren wrote me months later after her baby was born. A girl. She said she named her Eva. Not after my mother exactly, she said, but after the kind of women who survive the truth and don't let it swallow them. I cried when I read that too. There was a final hearing nearly a year later. I wore navy blue and no wedding ring. Ethan looked thinner, smaller somehow, stripped of the performance that used to fill every room. Linda avoided my eyes. When the judge reviewed the trust findings, the forged incapacity claim, the unauthorized disbursements, and the recorded admissions, I felt no dramatic triumph. Just a slow, deep exhale. Because the truth had finally been said in a place that counted. Afterward, in the hallway, Ethan tried one last time. Nora. I turned. He looked tired. Older. Angry in a quieter way. You didn't have to destroy everything. I almost kept walking. Then I remembered the woman I used to be. The one who would have swallowed her last word just to end a scene. So I gave myself the gift of one honest answer. You destroyed everything the moment you decided I was too broken to notice. I left him standing there. Now, if you came to my house on a Sunday morning, you'd find Oliver building forts in the living room and me making pancakes badly because I still burn the first batch every time. The curtains are open. The bills are paid. There is a folder in my desk labeled important documents, and I know exactly what's in it. I am not rich in the fairy tale way people imagine when they hear about trust funds and court orders. A lot was lost. Some was recovered. Enough remained for stability, for Oliver's future, for choices I never had before. But the greatest thing I got back was not money. It was authorship. I stopped telling my life through Ethan's vocabulary. Not dramatic hurt. Not unstable grieving. Not bad with money deliberately excluded. Not difficult, finally unwilling to disappear. That is the thing I want every woman listening to understand. Control does not always sound like shouting. Sometimes it sounds like patience. Sometimes it sounds like I'll handle it. Sometimes it sounds like a man kissing your forehead while quietly moving your future into another account. Sometimes it sounds like family telling you not to ask hard questions because you're too emotional, too tired, too complicated. But your confusion is not proof you are broken. Sometimes confusion is the first alarm bell. Sometimes the body knows before the mind can bear it. The too long pause. The paper snatched too quickly. The bill that makes no sense. The sentence designed to make you doubt your own memory. Pay attention to those moments. They are often the first crumbs leading you back to yourself. My mother left me money, yes. But what saved me in the end was a sentence she wrote before she died and somehow still placed directly into my hands at the exact moment I needed it. Do not marry any person who asks you to doubt your own mind. I would add one more line now, from me to you. If someone builds their peace on your silence, break it. Because the night I found my husband's secret bank account, I thought I had discovered money. What I really discovered was the price of trusting the wrong voice and the power of finally choosing my own.